Hey guys, this is Holy City Center Radio, episode 78. I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, January 30th, 2023. Amadou Diallo, Oscar Grant III, George Floyd, Andre Brown Jr., Dante Wright, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, Elijah McClain, Stephen Clark, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Walter Scott, countless others, and now Tyre Nichols. Tired of talking about these things, and I know I could just not, um, especially since it's not directly related to Charleston. But when big things happen nationally, um, sometimes people are interested to hear more about it. If you're not interested to hear more about this case, I understand. You come here for Charleston stuff. I get it. Um, and maybe talking about this stuff is just selfish in a way for me to try to work through it. But yeah, I'm tired of talking about violence in this country. I have this podcast, so excited to talk about Charleston stuff. And yeah, of course, there's local news, especially when it comes to things like politics that are not always great, not always fun. Um, but this stuff, the violence in this country, it's on a different level than all that, of course, when we're talking about life and death. Whether it's mass shootings, or people, specifically black people, and even more specifically, black men dying at the hands of police. Um, and the videos are horrific to see. They're disturbing. They're terrifying. And this one was no different. Um, like I said, it just these things in the news are they. This is an understatement, but these things bum me out. They make me very sad. It's the lack of humanity that you see in these circumstances. It's the violence and how scary and frightening it is, and how far too often people in this country decide that's the route they're going to take. Uh, and who knows if it's happening more or less in history. You know, it's hard to know. I mean, obviously, if you look at history, humans have been violent forever. We like to think of ourselves as evolved and in a civilized society, not like, Neanderthals or even more recent history. When we look to the past and think, oh, that's crazy that they did, whatever at that time. We're not that evolved on that basic human level. Violence is everywhere. Uh, so, for those who somehow may have missed the news, um, on January 7th of this year, 5 Memphis Police Department officers severely beat Tyre Nichols, a 29-year-old black man, during a traffic stop, which led to his death 3 days later. The officers stopped Nichols for for driving recklessly. There seems to be the police department has since said they can't seem to find any evidence that supports that at this time. Regardless, even if he was driving recklessly, he didn't deserve to die. So anyway, they pulled him over, pulled him out of his car, used pepper spray, and tased him. At this point, he broke away and ran. No, you shouldn't run from the cops. However, that it does not mean you deserve to die. If you see this video, the police escalated this immediately, pulling him out of his car, dragging him out of the car. Okay, we don't know what really happened before then, even though there's reports that they can't seem to allege any of that pulling him out of the car was warranted. Was it running from police, or what I mean? Like, sometimes they're just trying to get someone out of the car as quick as possible. There's no evidence to suggest that was warranted. But even if it was, after pulling him from the car, pepper spraying him, tasing him, um, you know, just yelling at him in like this really frantic tone. And Tyre Nichols was like the calming voice during that, just being like, "Whoa, what did I do? What, you guys don't have to do this. I'm complying." There's he's at one point you came like, okay. Like, he was kind of like questioning them at first, and then when they just escalated, he was kind of like the one who was trying to calm the situation. Okay, and uh, I don't blame him from running away based on how they were treating him. Like, if anybody that wasn't in a police uniform had done that to me, I'd be scared for my life. And just because they're in a police uniform doesn't mean you shouldn't be. And clearly, he had every reason to be scared for his life. So, no, I don't blame him from running. And again, you shouldn't, but I don't blame him based on that video. So, and again, running does not mean you deserve to die. So, anyway, they eventually caught up with him and then just beat him for 3 minutes, punching, kicking him in the head, striking him on the back with a baton. By the way, a lot of that is while he was completely restrained. A lot of this was bad, but that was the next level. That's that lack of humanity. These cowards have badges, handcuffed a man, had guys on his back keeping him on the ground while one of the other officers kicks him in the head. And then when they pull him to his feet, an officer sucker punches him multiple times in the head. He's cuffed. Not only is he cuffed, he's cuffed in the traditional way with his hands behind his back. Not only is he cuffed with his hands behind his back, he's being held up by another officer. Completely defenseless. He wasn't fighting back. He was just standing there. And they sucker punched him. Hit him with a baton, kicked him in the head. Absolutely no justification for any of that. It was hard to watch, and you don't need to. If you haven't seen it, you don't need to. You know what happened. There's no something in the video that's going to be like, "Oh, no, hey, look, that's why they did that. He deserves there's nothing. It's just violence. We've seen it before. Sometimes with guns, sometimes beatings like this. So if you haven't seen it, you don't need to. What you're hearing about how bad it is and what happened is true. It's on the video. What is just as bad as some of the other stuff on the video, as is often the case with this, what the police put in their report, it didn't match up to what was seen on video. Thank God for body cameras, right? How many times have we heard one thing and then when the video comes out, it's completely different? And it's horrible to think about before there are body cameras or street cameras like there were in this instance as well. What police had gotten away with in the past. These people have cameras on. They know they have body cameras on them, and they still did this. So after beating him, sucker punching him, he's lying on the ground. They have to drag him across the street a little bit to prop him up on the police car because he couldn't stay up on his own. That was about the extent of the aid, quote unquote, they provided him. He sat there up against the car, bleeding, beaten, bruised. Hard to tell if he's even conscious. And he's a couple times starts to slide down and falls over and can't protect himself when he falls because, one, he's handcuffed, and two, he's not there mentally at that point. No one's rendering him aid. No one's helping. It takes over 23 minutes for him to get medical care. He dies 3 days later in the hospital. Autopsy said that there was extensive bleeding caused by the severe beating. And there's nothing in the video that justifies it. There's nothing in there that seems that Nichols is provoking them. Thankfully, the Memphis Police Department did act fairly quickly. The 5 officers, all black men, by the way. I know a lot of people wanted about the race of officers. In this scenario, they were all black men. But that doesn't change what happened, of course, and doesn't make this any different, They were all fired on January 20th. And then on January 26th, they were arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, assault, and misconduct. 2 Memphis firefighters who were on the ambulance that took Nichols to the hospital were relieved of their duties pending an investigation, which is being done by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and the United States Justice Department. Tyre Nichols was, by estimates, a 140-pound man. He has a 4-year-old son. But a 140-pound man and several police officers, 5 predominant, the ones that we mentioned, much bigger than him. Plus, again, badges, protection, weapons, none of which he had. And you can hear the officers on the video after making up crap. Oh, yeah, I think he, well, they didn't say think. Oh, yeah, he tried to grab so-and-so's gun. Yeah. Oh, he had like super strength, that guy. They told his mother, who, by the way, was only a few hundred yards away, I guess, from the scene, which is why on the video when he cries out for his mom believes he was literally trying to get her to hear him scream because he was so close to his mom's house. The police taunted him. They acted like this. They were talking like they were villains in a movie. I'm gonna tase your ass and stuff like that. Like, what police officers are like this? They just escalated and escalated, and they're just saying things like that. Like, what kind of professionalism is that? And I know that seems silly, but it kind of speaks to the attitude that these guys had. Like, they're almost like vigilantes, this like unit that they had as a specialty unit, supposedly, which, by the way, Memphis Police Department says they've ended that program. And Tyre Nichols was so much calmer, even though he was being beat and was having these psychotic sounding men attacking him. Like, they sounded out of their minds. Like, it was bizarre that they reacted the way they did. Tyre even says at one point, "You guys are really doing a lot right now." Like, he in that moment's like, "This is way overboard." But yes, they're making up lies, trying to justify the beating. They were taunting him when he called out for his mom. I mean, just a complete and utter lack of humanity. And going back to his mother, they went to the house and told her he was arrested for DUI, asked her if she knew if he was on any drugs because, he's so strong, this like superhuman strength. And then they also told her that he was going to be booked. And they knew he wasn't going to be booked, at least not at that moment. They told her he was going to jail right then and there. They knew he was going to the hospital because they beat him so badly. And the ambulance came before they went and spoke to the mother. All of that was lies. There's absolutely no evidence of DUI, no evidence that this superhuman strength they were talking about and claiming, none of it. None of it was true. They also said in the initial police report he was taken to the hospital for, quote, shortness of breath, end quote. A lot of ass covering attempts at that. So that's the story as we see it now. Again, hard to talk about. The more I thought about the video after watching it, which, by the way, I couldn't even finish it. There was really no reason for me to watch it. I knew it was probably what everybody was saying was true. I mean, it's on video. Just, it's the same old story. It's really sad. Words seem to fail in these circumstances. I say things like terrifying and disgusting and whatever else, and they just don't seem to fit. Also because between mass shootings and police killings, it seems routine at this point, and like I'm repeating myself each time. So that's another reason I'm like, well, no, I feel like devastating, and it just doesn't fit anymore. Especially because, I mean, I'm glad I'm still upset by these things and I'm not numb to it, because I think maybe some people probably are at this point. But it is somewhat routine. It's just going to be a matter of time before the next mass shooting or the next police beating, police shooting, whatever it may be. Just a matter of time. We'll be talking about it again. Cycle starts all over again. So, yeah, a little disheartened. Felt I needed to talk about it. And again, maybe it was just for me to talk it out because I haven't talked to a lot of people about it this weekend. Sometimes just trying to work it out and discuss how with other people, so you know that other people are like, yeah, I don't get it either. And then being thankful that you surround yourself with good people who would never dream to do these types of violent acts. Hard to transition from that, but another national story, just real quick. The body camera footage from Paul Pelosi's attack was released. He is the husband of Nancy Pelosi, who was House Speaker at the time of the attack. Just bringing it up because the video was released and it put to bed a lot of those dumb conspiracy theories and nonsense that people were spewing about the case. There's always going to be people who, despite when, most of the dumb things people were saying on the internet were proven to be false, are still going to cling to something else. But, once again, body camera shows what happens. And sometimes those things you see are shocking, and this was shocking. Again, another act of violence. You can see the man who broke into Pelosi's house go to strike Paul with the hammer. It just happens outside. He kind of like goes off camera, so you don't actually see it, but you see the windup. Just another horrifying thing to watch. Again, violence and body cameras telling the truth. All right, bring it back here. The story, of course, everyone's talking about, besides the national stories. Although this is a national story, but it's happening here in South Carolina. Of course, I'm talking about Alex Murdaugh's case. The first week of the trial wrapped up. I'm going to give a quick little just review of a couple things and then talk about some things that happened after I recorded the last podcast to make sure you all are caught up before court gets back in session today on Monday. So yes, the first week of the Alex Murdaugh murder trial wrapped up Friday after a 3-day jury selection and included graphic opening statements as well a couple days later, and then first responders detailing their response on the night that Alex's wife and son were killed. Alex Murdaugh, you may remember, the 54-year-old is charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 weapons charges in the fatal shootings of his wife, Maggie Murdaugh, who was 52 at the time of her death, and Paul Murdaugh, his son, who was 22. The killings happened on the family's hunting property out in Colleton County back on June 7th, 2021. So, since the last podcast, here are some updates. It was revealed in court that the black Suburban that Murdaugh was driving that day had been swabbed in nearly a dozen places around the driver and passenger sides, and those swabs preliminary tested positive for blood. So that was a pretty big revelation that came out. One of the witnesses was Laura Rutland, who is a crime scene investigator. She remarked that Murdaugh appeared to be clean, from head to toe. She did not see any blood on his clothes, his hands, his arms, or shoes. So, from some people's perspective, that is like, well, you said you were checking the pulse of Paul, and then you checked your wife, and you might have moved Paul's body a little bit, which is what he said to police during his interview. But there's no blood anywhere on him. You would think in such a horrific murders, if you're touching these bodies or kneeling by them, there's blood everywhere, and somehow he doesn't have any on him whatsoever. So that seems suspicious, to the point that Rutland even said that his clothes look fresh, and also said that another indication to her that it was fresh was because Alec was sweating. It was June in South Carolina. He was sweating, but his clothes were dry. So that kind of played into something's not adding up here. The defense tried to frame it as, oh, well, if he was the person who shot Maggie and Paul, he should have blood all over him. So they were kind of taking that side of things. Like, well, he obviously didn't kill them. Whereas the prosecution is saying, well, no, he still did. He just changed his clothes. They were fresh. They weren't wet, even though he was supposedly sweating that night. So they're attacking it from both sides on that one. In his 911 call and the interview that was played in court, Murdaugh brought up the boat crash, as we mentioned. He also brought that up. We saw that in that first day of witness testimony when the body camera footage where he kind of volunteered that information. So 3 separate times, the official interview with police when they asked him, like, what do you think could be behind this? But then the other 2 times, unprompted, had brought up the boat accident involving Paul. So that seems suspicious to some people. He also claimed in his interview with police that he didn't see or communicate with his wife for close to an hour before he left the house to check on his ailing mother. That's his alibi. He went into the house, fell asleep, woke up, decided to go check on his mother who had been sick. And so he says he didn't talk to her for close to an hour before he left. However, in their opening statement and court papers that were filed before the trial, prosecutors said that a video shot by Paul Murdaugh about 20 minutes before his father drove away, according to cell phone data, had the voices of all 3 people on it. So Maggie's heard on it, Paul and Alec as well. So that contradicted his timeline. Another interesting part, which we had heard about, prosecutors said the cell phones of both victims stopped being used about 4 minutes after Paul took that video. So their indication is that, Paul takes this video and 4 minutes later, there's no more, texting, phone calls, internet usage. Like both phones 4 minutes later just stop being used. The implication, of course, being that's when they were killed. So Alex, the description is not adding up from that interview. We'll see how much jurors think, hey, was it he saw something really tragic and wasn't thinking he had to account for his whereabouts, and so maybe he got the timeline a little wrong? Or was this him lying? And another example of that, the fresh clothes thing is interesting too. Which way will the jurors go on that? Hey, sounds like he got some fresh clothes to hide the bloody ones. Or are they going to take the other side of, well, no, I those are probably his clothes that he was wearing all night. He just, he clearly didn't kill them because they would have been covered in blood. So we'll see what they think there. But that's the latest. The trial will continue today, and I'll be sure to bring more updates to you on Wednesday's podcast. An update from another case that we talked about previously in the courts. South Carolina Republican lawmakers are taking the next step to try to save their new congressional maps. They are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to reveal a federal court ruling that determined their political boundaries violated the rights of Black voters. This is the gerrymander case we talked about. The challenge, filed January 27th, came about 3 weeks after a panel of federal judges unanimously ruled that the 1st congressional district that's currently held by Nancy Mace had been unconstitutionally drawn to dilute Black voting power for partisan gain. Mace's, current seat in that office is not immediately affected by any of this back and forth in the courts. She is a representative. Even if it ends up that the fact that the district was gerrymandered stays in the courts, it's not going to affect, there's not going to kick her out of office or bring up a revote or anything like that. But depending on what the courts do decide, it will determine whether a different congressional map will be in place in 2024 for voters in Beaufort, Berkeley, Charleston, Colleton, Dorchester, and Jasper counties. In their 29-page filing, attorneys argue that the order and findings by the U.S. District Court were, quote, riddled with legal and factual mistakes, end quote. They also claim that they misapplied the law. So we'll see where this goes. No surprise that this is being challenged. Figured that was going to happen, just like when the state Supreme Court ruled that the South Carolina's abortion ban was unconstitutional. We knew that Henry McMaster and proponents of the ban would try to take it back to court. So we'll keep you updated on that. Well, obviously, we've got a while to go in this case. We'll see if it holds up that it was, in fact, gerrymandered. All right, just some quick stories before we wrap up this podcast. There was just those big stories just kind of dominated this weekend, but believe it or not, there were some other things that happened. Former President Donald Trump, who was twice impeached during his time in office, he held his first campaign event in Columbia this past weekend on Saturday. The former president addressed hundreds of his supporters at the South Carolina State House. During this campaign stop, he unveiled his South Carolina leadership team for his 2024 campaign. In addition to that, he, obviously, as to be expected, he railed against the Democrats and President Joe Biden. He talked about the southern border, saying securing that is still one of his biggest priorities. He also repeated some election fraud lies. So, pretty typical stuff. Nothing surprising happened. The type of stuff we've seen from President Trump's other rallies. So no big breaking news there. Nothing of real interest happened. Just kind of same old, as he was there in Columbia. Unfortunately, one thing did change here in Charleston, and that's that the men's basketball team lost. We are not used to that this season. They've only lost once. They were on a roll. Unfortunately, yes, on Saturday, in front of a home crowd, College of Charleston Cougars fell to Hofstra by a score of 85-81. They had been on a roll this season, had the nation's longest winning streak. That is no more. They are ranked currently. We'll see if that continues today. Polls usually come out on Mondays, so we'll see how far the Cougars fall, if they indeed do. You would expect them to, since they lost to an unranked team. We'll see if this keeps them in the polls, though, or if they fall out of that top 25. Well, be sure to update you. We have a new restaurant opening on Tuesday, January 31st. So tomorrow, the culinary wine and beverage team behind Mount Pleasant Savi, Cocina, and Wine Bar will open their new concept, the Sommba, Cocina, and Cellar. Like I said, it'll open to the public on Tuesday, January 31st. They're going to open at 4 p.m. According to the owners and folks behind the restaurant, the menu is going to have an extensive wine list, handcrafted cocktails, a variety of flavorful small plates inspired by the European coastline and islands off of Spain, Italy, and France. If you're interested in learning more, of course, you can go to holycitycenter.com to see some photos and learn more about the restaurant, or you can just go ahead and visit starting on Tuesday. They're going to be in the Indigo Square at 1710 Shoremead Road, which is off of Highway 17 in Mount Pleasant. Also of note, Spoleto Festival USA on Friday announced programming for their 47th season, which will be taking place here in Charleston from May 26th to June 11th. The 17-day celebration of international arts and culture will feature more than 100 events and venues throughout the city. Tickets start at $25, and they're now available for purchase at spoletousa.org. You can also call them at 843-579-3100. One last thing before we wrap up. I thankfully did have a good weekend despite the news. A couple good things happened. Number one, I want to say congratulations to my friends Shannon and Jen, who have opened up the medical spa and salon with some other folks out on Kiowa. The friends of mine are operating the salon side. Haircuts, all that good stuff. You know what a salon is. Come on. Maybe I don't. Maybe that's why I struggled over that. No, my friend Shannon has cut my hair several times over the years. She's amazing. And I'm very proud of them for opening up. On Saturday, they had a grand opening celebration with some raffles, small bites, drinks, and just people could come in and check out the space. It looks great. Really happy and proud of them. Be sure to check them out if you're looking for a new salon to go to. And also on the other side, like I said, they have some other things like cool sculpting. I don't know if that's like a brand name, so they might have a different version of that, or if that's like the official term of it. Again, sorry, that side of things is definitely not in my wheelhouse, but that's the other side of the business. They are, up and running, and if you're interested, be sure to go check them out. So I had fun on Saturday with that. I also had fun on Thursday night. I went to see comedian Jim Gaffigan at the North Charleston Coliseum. Great show, had a lot of fun. Got out of the show pretty early. I'm looking at my watch like, man, I forgot. Like, yeah, comedy shows can get out pretty quick if it's just like one opener and then the headliner. Unfortunately, parking was crazy at North Charleston Coliseum because I think they had an event at the Performing Arts Center that night too, perhaps. But for sure, also we're doing this, the convention center there had some boat show going on. And so there's boats everywhere, and parts of the parking lot were just blocked off. So it was difficult getting in there close to showtime, and took a long time to get out because I was at the top level of that garage and nobody was moving. But I learned from my mistakes, as I had a show the next night at the North Charleston Coliseum. Yes, on Friday, I went to the big Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock show. Got there earlier than I did for the show the previous night. Also parked off-site, down by the fire museum there. So number one, I didn't have to pay for parking, which was nice. Just had to walk across the street to get to the Coliseum, but it made leaving much, much quicker. But my friend and I went. Both really enjoyed the show. If it was just Dave Chappelle, I'm not sure I would have went. I loved Dave Chappelle for years and years, and like other folks, was fairly disappointed in some of his material that he's put out on Netflix. I'm a firm believer in just really anything can be funny. Even sad, horrible things can be funny. And my friends know I like to joke about everything, and we'll sometimes make a joke like that about something that's bad. But, here's the key, especially if you're a stand-up comedian. You really have to thread that needle. And I don't feel like Dave Chappelle threaded that needle with some of his jokes about trans people. Again, I think you can joke about anything, anybody, and it can be funny. But if you miss, and it's not good. And you have to be prepared for that. And he seems to be pretty butthurt that people didn't think his jokes were particularly funny, that they missed the mark, and therefore, instead of being funny, they came off as hateful, and then he just doubled down on it. So I was kind of on the fence, like, but he's one of the greatest stand-up comedians of all time. And he was with Chris Rock. So I was like, all right, let's go, let's give it a shot. But I knew going in, there's probably going to be some jokes that I was going to like, kind of shake my head at. And there were, and that's from all of the comedians, and that's most comedians I see. There's some the jokes just aren't funny, but there's some where you're like, ooh, they were trying to go after something that's a little controversial. And if you miss, like I said, it doesn't always come off very great. So there's moments like that in the show. I expected it, so I'm not like upset about it. I don't think anything particularly horrible was said, at least that I caught. Forgive me if I missed something, but during it was a long show. There was actually two openers. One guy I hadn't heard of before, but the second opener was Donnell Rawlings, who you may remember from Chappelle's show. He also starred on The Wire. But yeah, they all had a few jokes. You're like, ugh. And that runs the gamut from, that doesn't sound so great, joking about that group of people or whatever. I don't think you really hit that, to just like corny stuff. The first opener in particular, but really all four of them in some capacity, really leaned into cancel culture, and millennials, like those jokes at this point, even if they're funny, which oftentimes they're not, it's just them griping about perceived slights in the media or online because they said something insensitive or whatever. They seem hacky at this point too. Like every comedian has a bit about cancel culture and how you can't cancel me or I don't care. And, oh, if they're going to cancel me, it's going to be something dumb anyway. It's, again, not even really jokes most of the time. It's just them complaining. And it's hacky, just like the millennial jokes. And or Gen Z jokes, I should say. I'm forgetting the generational names. But, generational jokes can be funny. But again, they really have to be, especially when every comedian is doing some dumb joke about Gen Zers or millennials, or younger comedians are all doing boomer jokes. Like, okay, like again, just seems kind of hacky, those two things, because everyone's doing it. You can get a few cheap applause breaks from people who are like, yeah, cancel culture is the worst, just like easy, stuff like that. So anyway, I'm making it sound like the show was bad and not enjoyable, and that's very far from the case. Those were just my complaints, because I knew going to Chappelle would rub some people the wrong way, and I totally get it. Believe me, I do. But the show was great. Otherwise, I thought, especially Chris Rock, just did a killer job. He did some bits about the infamous slap from Will Smith, and I thought that was maybe the funniest part of his whole performance. I thought he just covered it really, really well, and it was really, really funny. I mean, I think he threaded the needle on most of the controversial jokes. There's a couple that I was like, meh. But I thought he actually, made some things that could be tough to talk about. He made some pretty funny jokes that weren't like offensive or, hacky and things like that. So I was stoked to see him. I think I first remember Chris Rock from that stand-up special he had in like 1998 where he became super famous. And so I've seen his other specials. Obviously, I've seen him in all sorts of TV and movies. So it was really cool to see him on stage. And it was cool to see Chappelle, too. I mean, look, he can be one of the greatest comedians of all time, and I think he is. Uh, but also, he could have made some stupid jokes that didn't work and were offensive. Both things can be true. And I think the one of the greatest comedians alive thing shone through far more on this evening. Like I said, he made a couple of jokes. So I was like, that's not the best. I don't think that's particularly funny. It's more the offensive side of things. But by and large, his set was really funny. He did some crowd work that was great. And anyway, show was fun. I had a blast, and was glad that I had some fun things to do and some friends to celebrate this weekend. Because, like I said, that sometimes the news, whether it's locally or nationally, can be tough, even if it doesn't directly involve. Well, I'm saying you, but me. It can be tough, and I'm sure others out there feel the same way. It's tough to hear bad things. So, very thankful for all that good stuff, and hopeful that this week we will have more good news and fun things and less of the bad, because there's a lot of good things going on, and a lot of things to be happy about while we push for change in other sections. Thank you for listening. Like I said, sometimes episodes like these are almost therapy sessions for me, where I just want to talk about something traumatic I saw on TV that I'm sure to others is unspeakably more tragic for other people in the community to watch and to see and read about again. But I appreciate you all listening, and if these episodes aren't your cup of tea, I totally get it. 100% understandable, and hopefully we'll get back to more of a normal routine, more of the Charleston fun stories, like event announcements and restaurant openings and all that good stuff. So thank you for sticking with me on a tough episode, and for always listening. Please rate and review this podcast. It helps get this into other people's ears. Also, please subscribe on whatever platform you prefer so you don't miss any episodes. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins as well. She produces each and every episode of Holy City Center Radio with LMC Sound System. She also has a podcast, F&B Radio, that you should listen to. Thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you may be hearing right now underneath me while I'm talking. I don't know where Lindsay's going to plug that in. Maybe it's after me. I don't know, but you're going to hear music if you're not already. That's Tyler Boone. Go download his music on whatever streaming platform you prefer. And as always, until Wednesday's episode, I sign off saying good night and good luck.